Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. I appreciate you being with me so very, very much. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. All right. Well, let's get right into it. We need to look at the context from which Paul draws in 1 Corinthians 15. Paul said the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15 would be the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 25, verse 8. Death is swallowed up in victory. Well, you see, Isaiah 25 is couched in a context of what is known as the little apocalypse. What scholars mean when they use that term is that Isaiah 24 to 27, some include all the way to chapter 29, is the New Testament writers they quote from those chapters over and over and over when they are predicting the time of the end. Apocalypse, the revealing, the end time revelation. Well, it behooves us, therefore, since Paul says the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15 would be in fulfillment of Isaiah 25, it behooves us to look at the context of Isaiah chapter 25. That entire prophetic context. I think Richard Hayes is absolutely correct when he points out, along with many, many other scholars, that when the New Testament writers give us a snippet quote, a snippet allusion, if you please, from the Old Testament prophetic text, that the Hebraic hermeneutic of the first century was that it was bringing that entire prophetic context to the mind of the reader or the listener. That's the practice of what is known as metalepsis. And you can find that in Richard Hayes' writings, N.T. Wright, and other scholars as well. It's a well-known Hebraic hermeneutic. So, in order to fully appreciate Paul's citation of Isaiah 25, we have to go back to Isaiah 24. And for brevity, let me take note that Isaiah chapter 24 predicts the destruction of the earth, verses 1 through 3. The land shall be utterly emptied and utterly plundered. The Lord makes the earth empty, makes it waste and desolate. Now watch verse 4. The earth mourns and fades away. The world languishes and fades away. The haughty people of the earth languish. The earth is defiled under its inhabitants because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, broken the everlasting covenant. Oh, wait a minute. Who are these people? Who are these people whose sin of violating the everlasting covenant and of breaking the laws of God, who are these to be identified as? Well, you go down in verse 9 and following, they're guilty of drunkenness, they're guilty of all sorts of sin. And notice verse 10, the city of confusion is broken down, every house is shut up so that none may go in it. Verse 12, in the city of confusion, or in the city, desolation is left, and the gate is stricken with destruction. When it shall be thus in the midst of the land among the people. Okay, wait a minute. Here is Yahweh predicting the destruction of earth as a result of the sin of the people who dwell in the city of confusion in the midst of the land. Now, if you are a, quote, Jew, unquote, to use that term, and you're reading this, to you who are the people, who is the city dwelling in the midst of the land? Well, it's a city of confusion. According to Isaiah chapter 29, part of the little apocalypse, the city of confusion is Ariel, none other than Jerusalem. Here is a prediction of the destruction of Israel and Jerusalem, the destruction of the land as a result of the sin of violating and breaking the everlasting covenant by the people. Listen to me very carefully. If this is a prediction of the so-called end of time, then it demands, pardon me, it demands, number one, that Israel is still God's covenant people, because after all, this destruction comes as a result of the people violating the everlasting covenant. Okay? Point number two. If therefore this is a prediction of the destruction of literal creation at the end of time, then it is the destruction of literal creation as a result of Israel violating the old law. And that means the old law would have to be in effect until the end of time. So let me ask you something. Do you know anyone that teaches that earth will one day be destroyed as a result of Israel's violation of the old law? You know, in my recent debate with Dr. David Hester, I cited Daniel chapter 12, verses 2 to 7, in which the resurrection would take place, quote, when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. David Hester was so desperate to avoid the power of that text that he finally told us, after changing his position 3 or 4 times, he finally told us that the holy people there is none other than the church, and that Daniel chapter 12 is referring to the resurrection at the end of human time. Oh, that means that the gospel, which is the power of God to salvation, it's the only power the church has, the gospel will be shattered at the end of time as a result of the church's violation of that covenant, Isaiah 24. Oh, but wait, Jesus said His word, the gospel, will never pass away. Jesus said the gospel, not only the gospel, but the church will never be destroyed. Daniel said that, Daniel 2:44, Daniel chapter 7. 13 and 14. So Dr. Hester wound up affirming the exact opposite of what the Bible says. The Bible says the church will never be destroyed, the gospel will never be shattered or cease to function, and yet Dr. Hester, which by the way is the position of most futurists, has the resurrection at the end of time when earth is destroyed. Well, wait a minute, folks. Isaiah 24 is the destruction of, quote, earth, unquote, as a result of Israel's violation of the everlasting covenant. If your eschatology does not have a place in it for a yet future destruction of literal earth as a result of Israel's violation of the everlasting covenant, guess what? Then you got to deal with Isaiah chapter 24. Because it is a prophecy of the time of the resurrection. The resurrection of Isaiah 25 verse 8 would be at the time of the judgment of the people and the city which sat in the midst of the land, and that judgment would come as a result of that people violating the everlasting covenant. So who are you going to make? The people. What are you going to make? The everlasting gospel. How are you going to correlate that with the fact that the gospel will never be shattered? The church will never cease to exist. It just doesn't work. Look, I developed this and a whole lot more in my book, The Resurrection of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 2, Future or Fulfilled. Go to my website, DonKPreston.com or BibleProphecy.com. Order the book. Send me a note saying that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping, saving you $5. Thanks so much for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. And look, we got a whole lot more on the little apocalypse and Paul's expectation of its fulfillment at the resurrection. So we will see you on the flip side.